Back on the hard count, national recruiting analyst for On3, Josh Newberg. Josh, we're at the desk, man. It feels a lot like signing day.
Yeah, here we are.
It's
We're going to talk recruiting. Feels just like signing day. It's always great to be here on the hard count. Let's do it.
Let's ride.
What are we talking about?
Talk a little recruiting, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Recruiting just never stops. I mean, there's like dead periods and there's slower periods, but really it's a year-round thing. And I was looking at some of these top guys throughout that top 10 currently at the time of us recording this and it's, airing live. 7 of those top 10 players are committed. Is this a sign of the times? Is that high in your mind? Like, are we seeing more guys commit earlier being a trend in modern college football?
Maybe a little. I mean, 7 out of the top 10 are committed, but 11 of the top 20 are uncommitted. Sure. So more than half of the top 20 are uncommitted. I don't know if, hey, look, to get to, statistically speaking, we see 600 decommitments a cycle.
Wow.
How do you get to 600 decommitments? Well, you have to get to 600 commitments
go.
first. So, no, I don't think so. I think, commitments breed decommitments. So we will see these early commits. We'll see a good majority of them stick. Don't get me wrong. A good majority of these early commitments will stick. But we're going to see a lot of decommitments, and this is how you get to a lot. You got to get a lot of early commitments. And, the earlier commitments that come, we haven't even started official visit season.
Yeah.
So a lot of these committed guys will still take other official visits to the team that they're not committed to. So I think the summer, we'll see a lot of change. And then, of course, at the end of fall when coaching carousel begins and all that, that's the next time that we'll see a lot of decommitments. But until mid to late summer, from now till mid to late summer, it's just a ramp up of commitments.
And it's kind of a funny place to be in modern recruiting because so many times we hear guys commit and then you go, okay, they're committed, but a final decision is still coming. So, all right, so you're dating, but you're not married is kind of what I'm hearing there from a lot of these guys. And one of those guys that's still taking visits, Julian Lewis.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the top quarterbacks in this class who reclassified from 2026 to 2025. He is a USC Trojan currently, still taking visits. Anything you want to add with Julian Lewis? I mean, I know there's a lot going on there. Is there anything you want to make sure that the folks know about when it comes to his recruitment?
I'm about due on the On3 Recruits channel from time to time. I have my Julian Lewis power rankings.
Ooh.
And I've had Georgia in the top spot of my Julian Lewis power rankings despite his commitment to USC. Now, one of the reasons why I had UGA as the front runner to land Julian Lewis is because Julian Lewis committed to USC in August. USC did not land another 2025 commitment until this weekend when they flipped Justice Terry from Georgia and, the ball got rolling. They ended up landing 4 more commitments. But up until this point, Julian Lewis was the last commitment in USC's 2025 class. Now, I do think the momentum matters. I think that the fact that they're starting to surround him with top recruits does matter. I think that they do need that momentum on the recruiting trail to sustain Julian Lewis's commitment despite all these other teams in the South coming after him. You got Georgia, you got Alabama, you got Auburn, you got Colorado, not that they're in the South, but you understand. There's a lot of teams coming after him, and I think that this big weekend that USC had will do some help to keep him committed. Now, Julian Lewis has already set a spring visit tour. I DM'd him after that came out and said, are these official or unofficial? He said unofficial.
Okay.
So that makes me think that he's probably going to visit all these teams again officially. So we're nowhere near the conclusion of this recruitment. And I know a lot of USC fans watching saying, hey, well, he's committed to USC. Why are you talking about it? Because he's taking so many visits. He's taking him to visits in the South, especially because, he's from Carrollton, Georgia, and he's visiting Georgia. He's visiting Bama, visiting Auburn. We'll see what happens there. But Julian Lewis still does remain committed, and he should be back in LA, I believe, this weekend or next weekend. So I'm eager to see what Julian Lewis has to say coming out of that visit to see the Trojans.
Yeah, great segment from you and Scott Schrader on the Inside Scoop on the On3 Recruits channel. Subscribe and catch all the recruiting coverage all year long. The Inside Scoop dropping weekly, multiple times a week. Yeah. Bangers all the time. So check that out. Julian Lewis, for me, I'm a big fan of following like the gear science because there's hat science on signing day. I like to track if I'm a quarterback. Hey, what logo's on the towel? I've seen the Georgia towel a few times from Julian Lewis. So curious to see how that shakes out, but I'm with you. Having some momentum on the recruiting trail for them to say, hey, if you come to USC, you're going to have some other dudes that you're committing here with. And that's one of the teams that you mentioned a moment ago got active this past weekend. I mean, 4 commitments, all of them on the defensive side of the ball in the class of 2025. Why is this happening now? Do you have any gauge for why this is now starting to avalanche for USC? At least last weekend it was.
I think what happened was Lincoln Riley walked into the recruiting office at USC and just turned the lights on.
There it is.
They must just not have been operating in the recruiting office until he came in and flipped the switch. Because
sometimes it's hard to find. Light switch hard to find sometimes in some buildings.
At one point on Sunday, they land Isaiah Gibson right after they land Justice Terry. Isaiah Gibson is one of the top edges in the South, one of the top prospects in the state of Georgia. At one point, USC went from outside the top 50 when Lincoln Riley woke up on Sunday morning, because I'm assuming he's an early riser. Justice Terry flips his commitment at about, this must have been 5 a.m. West Coast time. It was about 8 a.m. East Coast time, so very early. Justice Terry flips, then Isaiah Gibson, and with 3 commitments, they went from outside the top 50 to a top 3 class, and all 3 of their first 3 commitments were from the state of Georgia. Of course, then they go out and they land Gus Cordova out of California, and they land Gus Cordova out of the state of Texas, Hilton Stubbs out of the state of Florida. So they're still sitting on 5 commitments, and all 5 are from out of state.
It's a good time to be a Trojan. I'll tell you that right now. Good times, good vibes, and the flip from the state of Georgia and a Georgia commit, Justice Terry, like that felt sort of like a beat your chest kind of commitment. If you're Lincoln Riley, big time.
And if you're a USC fan and you were waiting for recruiting to start, what a weekend for recruiting to start.
And they kind of retooled that staff defensively with Eric Henderson. He brought Aaron Donald on campus. It sounds
and Eric Henderson is getting a lot of credit for the success that USC's having right now on the recruiting trail. We'll see if he can sustain it. Not only sustain it, but keep these guys committed. Remember, when I saw Justice Terry flip, it kind of gave me Michael Williams vibes. Michael Williams from small town in Georgia, committed to USC early, but when Penn had to hit paper, he probably looked over at his mom, kind of looked over at his family and thought, wow, I don't have to go 3,000 miles to accomplish everything I have to accomplish. And my parents and family can come see me almost every weekend. I think that's kind of hard. Now, like I said, I think a lot of these commitments will stick. I think USC is going to add a whole lot more. It's a numbers game. They're going to add more elite talent. They're going to lose some.
Yeah.
It's just the way recruiting goes.
It's the tide comes in and comes out. Yeah.
They're going to stack it. And USC recruiting, it's on now.
Number 3 class in the country in 2025. Currently, still a long way to go till signing day. To backtrack, Eric Henderson, NFL pedigree, most recently coached with the LA Rams. That's why Aaron Donald was at USC for that whole visit experience, it sounds like. Also, dude, one of the coolest nicknames in recruiting, Coach Henny. Coach Henny, man. I mean, that's an NIL. I'm just saying, that does some work for you of itself on the recruiting trail, I have to believe, when it comes to USC success. So we talked USC, we talked Julian Lewis. Before we move on to some teams to watch, any players you're tracking right now, Josh, that you think have an intriguing recruitment where things stand?
I mean, obviously Julian Lewis, but the number 1 offensive tackle, David Sanders, his recruitment is really heating up. Most people thought it was a Clemson-Georgia battle, which is fair. He's from North Carolina. Clemson really recruiting well also, but a visit to Tennessee. This weekend, he's going to be on campus in Columbus to see Ohio State. I believe Tennessee and Ohio State are teams that we need to mention when we talk about the number 1 offensive tackle in America. That is a recruitment that's going to be a heated contest.
Going to be back and forth, you think?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just one more to watch, DeCorian Moore. I know he's committed to LSU, but you're starting to hear rumblings, maybe Ohio State, maybe Texas. He's from Duncanville High School. Our number 1 wide receiver in America committed to LSU. We'll see what happens, see if he makes some spring visits.
Recruiting never stops, baby. Got to stay dialed in. Another reason to be subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel. So you're watching this on the On3 YouTube channel, the On3 Recruits channel, recruiting coverage all of the time. So, Josh, that's the players. Any other teams that we're watching right now? Because it's hard to say that USC's not a winner of March at this point in time. Still so early on. But any teams that you think could make a move, looking to make a move before this whole thing is
let's see what happens to Georgia. You know, Georgia was inside the top 10. They lose Justice Terry. They're bounced out to number 11 right now. They got to rebound, and they will. Elijah Griffin, the number 1 defensive tackle in America. He's in the state of Georgia. He's at Savannah, down in Savannah. And he also took a trip to USC. So I think Georgia, it was a bit of a wake-up call over the weekend for Georgia. They lose Justice Terry. Elijah Griffin starts having great things to say. Most people thought he was a lock for Georgia. All of a sudden, he has great things to say about his trip to USC. See how they bounce back. Then you got LSU just stacking number 1 players at their position. Yeah. But when you stack number one players at your position, you're going to have a bullet on your chest for the remainder of the cycle. Teams are going to be coming after your commitments. Like we said, Ohio State having a big weekend this weekend. Keep an eye on that. Tennessee, Florida State is kind of gearing up for a run. Miami, we got a big decision coming from the number 8 linebacker in America, TJ Alford, this weekend. He's deciding between Miami and Ohio State.
Wow.
But even if he commits to Ohio State, remember signing day last year? It seemed like Miami was the arch nemesis of Ohio State. The 2 years in a row flipping meaningful players from Ohio State late. So TJ Alford's from Vero Beach, Florida, but I think he's going to commit to Ohio State on Saturday. So that's another one to watch down the stretch with Miami and Ohio State. A lot of fun things on the docket, and we're not even to summer yet.
And it sounds like Miami, to go back to signing day, they were doing everything in their power, to my understanding, to try and get that Jeremiah Smith commitment or that national letter of intent to not go to Columbus but go to Coral Gables.
And this year's Jeremiah Smith is going to be Jamie French, the wide receiver out of Jacksonville, Florida. He had a great multi-day visit to Miami over the weekend, but if you listen to the inside scoop, you know Ohio State is the team to beat for Jamie French, the 4-star wide receiver out of Jacksonville who decommitted from Alabama when Nick Saban retired. He's one of the most coveted wide receivers in America, and that's another Miami. Ohio State, put Florida State in there as well, maybe put Tennessee in there too. Whew.
Boys are buzzing.
Yeah.
The boys are buzzing across the board, man. It's a fun time in
fun.
recruiting, a fun time to be up on recruiting right now. And this is one more thing I want to get your thoughts on, Josh, before we wrap up here. Deion Sanders, not making home visits. To me, I was like, what are we doing? If we're Deion Sanders, we're one of the most charismatic individuals on the face of the planet. Get in front of as many recruits and coaches as possible in person. What were your thoughts when you heard that snippet from Deion Sanders saying essentially, listen, I'm not going to go in home to these guys. I'm Coach Prime. I can't do that.
He's not serious about high school recruiting, and that's okay, I guess. I mean, we're going to see how the results pan out with heavy on the transfer portal. But they finished 66th in high school recruiting last year. Right now, they have 0 2025 commitments. And I think in terms of going in home, and I heard what he said about the reasons why, but if you know, one of the main reasons why these coaches go in home is to learn more about the prospects that you're bringing into your program. You can learn a lot by going to a school. Hey, I've heard plenty of times coaches going into a school, going to look for a kid, and the coach says, oh, he's not here today. He doesn't really show up on Mondays or whatever. Well, if you find that out, there's a lot of good things you can find out of sitting in a family's house and learning about his family and learning these things. And I heard the excuses, but I don't think so. I mean, if you're a top recruit, well, if you're recruiting high school level, you don't just want to land a Jordan Seaton.
Yeah.
Georgia doesn't go out and just land a number one player. I mean, look at LSU. They don't go out and land one number one player. They have 4 number one players at their given position right now on their commitment list. So if you just think, oh, well, we landed Jordan Seaton last year, that's not stacking talent. I mean, it's a great piece, don't get me wrong, but they needed like 4 Jordan Seatons on that offensive line. And you can do some through the portal, but you got to recruit the high school level well. You look at Georgia, you look at Alabama, you look at Ohio State, you look at all these teams that compete year in and year out for a national championship. They recruit the high school level very hard, and they give it the time, money, and resources that it takes to find the right guys. And I think by shorting it and not doing in-home visits and not going to high schools, you know, recruiting, I view recruiting as a big puzzle.
Sure.
And I think these things are all pieces to the puzzle. Yeah, it's not everything in recruiting, but I do think these face-to-face opportunities to meet the high school coach, to do all these things are pieces of that puzzle. And look, if you're a top recruit and Kirby Smart comes to your house and Dan Lanning comes to your house and all these coaches are coming in and sitting on your couch, but Deion doesn't, I think that sends a message. Even if you don't want it, even if you're not looking for a message, it sends a message. And to me, it just shows that he's not very serious about recruiting at the high school level.
And if I'm one of those guys, too, not necessarily maybe those head coaches, but anybody that's trying to recruit against Colorado, like it's you in Colorado down to that final 2, final 3, it's like, hey, was Deion at your house for dinner? Okay, well, I was with the rest of my staff, and we broke bread with y'all together. Like, I think that matters. And also, I think the tough part for Deion, too, at this point in time is like, Colorado is not at a point where they can say, hey, just come to us and, you know, that'll be how you find out about us as a program. Like, there's, I think, still very much so in a proving ground.
I mean, if anybody could do that, Nick Saban in the heyday, 4, 5, 6 years
Kirby
ago.
Smart. Yeah.
Kirby Smart could have done that after off 2 natties, could have done the same thing, but they're not doing it because the school's telling them to. I mean, they're doing it because this is a part of their process of recruiting athletes to a school. And also, hey, what if you got a top-rated commitment? You know, if Coach Sanders really put his emphasis on the high school level, you're going to have all these guys committed to you. Well, other teams are going to be coming after him. You're just going to be a sitting duck down the stretch, not going to see these kids when you have the opportunity. When other coaches are trying to come in and flip them, you leave yourself open to a lot of dangers by not doing all that you can in high school recruiting.
Also, if you want to flip a kid, like it's much easier, I would have to believe, to flip a kid at their dinner table than trying to call him or Zoom him or whatever. Like, the face-to-face matters. I understand Zoom became a big thing during the pandemic, but I don't think it's the way that you necessarily can stack talent when it comes to the high school ranks and the world that is recruiting. That's Josh Newberg. Follow the On3 Recruits. Follow him on Twitter, first of all. Also subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. The Inside Scoop. Bangers all year round. Lock it in over there. Josh, recruiting doesn't stop, and you don't either. You're a machine. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.